Prologue. The court of Emperor Chandra prepares for a ritual involving his sister, Princess Malini. The pyre is being built for a sacred ceremony where women called Mothers of Flame are offered immortality. As the ritual begins, Malini refuses to conform to expectations, wearing mourning white instead of the ceremonial red and rejecting the opium-laced food. She stands defiant while the other women are blessed. The head priest offers her the choice to forsake immortality or rise to fulfill her role. Chandra, angry with his sister for ruining their family's honor, insists she rise, reminding her that her downfall is of her own making. As the pyre is lit, Chandra physically compels her to face the fire, but Malini refuses, resigning herself to her fate. She leaves him with a final acknowledgement. "I will not forget." The tension between sibling loyalty and betrayal. In Chapter 1, Priya knew someone important had been killed when Parijati guards raced past, prompting her to hurry to the old bazaar where fear spread as people anticipated market closures, like those that followed a merchant's murder 3 months prior, leading to brutal crackdowns and food shortages. At the market, she was shoved to the ground, resisting the violent instincts ingrained in her past, and upon reaching the apothecary's stall, found it closing, forcing her to leave empty-handed until she encountered starving children who knew her as the maid who provided sacred wood to combat the deadly rot. But with none to give, she sought out Gautam, a bitter supplier, trading her last valuables for the wood before meeting Rook, a rot-afflicted boy who begged for help, and in a final act of defiance against her past, she promised him a job at the regent's palace, offering. In Chapter 2, Malini was denied her usual dose of needle flower before reaching Ahiranya, leaving her mind clear but overwhelmed by grief and sensation as she endured Pramila's relentless recitation of the Book of Mothers, which glorified the sacrifice of Divyanshi and her sisters to end the Age of Flowers and establish the Empire. Observing the ruined land through her carriage curtain, Malini reflected on Ahiranya's lost power and dismissed the exaggerated tales of its brothels, but when she mocked the religious text, Pramila's anger flared, warning her of the consequences of disobedience as Lord Santosh approached to ensure Malini was prepared for the regent's court, prompting Pramila to double her dosage for the night while Malini, silently counting the shadows of the soldiers escorting her, fantasized about the many ways she would enjoy seeing her brother. In Chapter 3, Priya rushed Rook through the regent's mahal, handing him over to Khalida, a senior maid, who agreed to ask Lady Bhumika if he could stay, then hurried to the kitchens where she learned that Princess Malini was arriving unexpectedly, traveling alone without a royal retinue. Realizing there had been no murder, only a princess sent into exile, Priya later retrieved Rook, carved a sacred wood bead for him despite the pain, and reassured him about his new life before Sima, a friend, arrived with urgent news, revealing that Malini was to be imprisoned in the Hirana, the ruins of an ancient temple, and was struggling to find servants willing to tend to her. As Priya watched the princess arrive dressed in gray, she made a sudden decision. If working in the Hirana meant earning more coin, she would volunteer, seizing an opportunity. In Chapter 4, Malini arrived at the regent's palace, where General Vikram greeted her formally alongside his pregnant wife, Lady Bhumika, before Lord Santosh, eager to assert his control over her imprisonment, arranged a lavish meal. Struggling to eat after weeks of needle flower, Malini failed to focus on assessing the regent's loyalty. But when Santosh revealed that she was to be imprisoned in the Hirana, the temple where Ahiranya priests and children were burned alive, she masked her horror behind obedience. Climbing the ruined temple, she observed its grotesque carvings of yaksa and mortals entwined with nature, unsettling even the Parijati soldiers. Her prison was a chamber blackened by fire, confirming Chandra's cruel intent, and after Santosh's departure, Pramila forced her to drink the drugged wine. As she succumbed to the stupor, she vowed to survive, clinging to her rage and waiting. In Chapter 5, when Ashok was 10, he underwent his first immersion in the Deathless Waters, a sacred ritual marking the path to becoming a temple elder, having been trained to endure pain, hunger, and hardship like the Ahiranya warriors of the Age of Flowers. Emerging from the water, he experienced a vision of the Sangam, the mythical confluence of cosmic rivers where the elders once walked, convincing him that Ahiranya's lost power would return. Now, standing within the Sangam in a deep trance, his soul met a shadowy woman, trembling and weakened, who insisted she was close to finding a way to save them, though every moment in the river drained her. Sensing her pain, Ashok hesitated, wanting to tell her to return home, but instead encouraged her strength, vowing to wait as she disappeared, leaving him alone in the swamp. In Chapter 6, during their 4th week climbing the Hirana, disaster struck when Priya heard a scream and saw Seema trapped in a hidden crevice, barely holding on. With the rain making the stone dangerously slick, Gauri sent for guards, but Priya, sensing the Hirana's ancient connection to her, stepped away from the guiding rope and carefully navigated the treacherous carvings to reach Seema, convincing her to let go and grasp her hand, pulling her to safety. Later in the temple, Priya searched for Meena, who had gone missing, but instead stumbled upon the princess, Malini, lying on the floor with spilled wine staining her sari, her breath ragged from weeping. Paralyzed, Priya locked eyes with her before fleeing in shock. Finding Meena near the sacred Triveni, Priya scolded her for wandering too close to the princess's chambers, warning her to follow orders and focus on earning the extra. In Chapter 7, Priya and the maidservants returned from the Hirana at dawn, eating quickly before resting. Instead of sleeping, Priya visited the regent's orchard, where workers, including Rukh, were clearing blighted trees. She checked his sacred wood bead, ensuring his rot had not worsened. Rukh, uncharacteristically serious, begged her not to climb the Hirana for a week, hinting at something dangerous but refusing to explain. Later, Seema gave Priya the bead Rukh had left for her, reinforcing Priya's suspicion that something was wrong. Seeking answers, Priya attempted to visit Lady Bhumika but was turned away, noting a physician's presence. That night, as they climbed the Hirana, Meena disappeared again. When Priya found her, Meena revealed a crown mask of sacred wood, confirming Priya's past as a temple daughter and demanding to know the path to the deathless waters. Priya refused, leading to a brutal fight where she ultimately pushed Meena off the Hirana. Princess Malini witnessed the event and, in a shocking act of deception, collapsed, claiming Priya had saved her from an assassin. In Chapter 8, Ashok emerged from meditation, sensing Meena's death through the Sangam. He had trained her, given her a vial of the deathless waters, and sent her on a mission, only for her to fail. He regretted his sentimentality, recognizing that he had set her up for failure. As rain fell, he met Kritika, confirming Meena's death and ordering their rebel camp to relocate to avoid discovery. Concerned that Meena may have revealed information before dying, he sent Kritika to the regent's mahal to gather intelligence. With more of their fighters ailing, he knew they needed the deathless waters urgently. Reflecting on his failures, he recalled a broken promise to his sister Priya. He had let her go once, but now he would bring her back. He had felt her presence in the Sangam stronger than ever, and decided the rebellion needed her. In Chapter 9, Vikram spent the evening entertaining Prince Prem of Saketa and enduring Lord Santosh's probing questions about Ahiranya's security and growing rebellion. Santosh's arrogance and blatant disdain for Ahiranya people grated on Vikram, but he maintained diplomacy, knowing that Santosh was Emperor Chandra's representative. The night took a turn when conscience sounded, an attack on Princess Malini. Vikram climbed the Hirana, where he found Malini shaken but unharmed, pleading for protection. To keep her calm, he granted her request for the maidservant who saved her life. Later, Vikram and Santosh examined the assassin's body. She had died wearing a mask of sacred wood, which had melted her face. Santosh demanded retribution, pushing for purges and executions. Vikram, knowing he had to maintain his rule, agreed to a public sacrifice. As Santosh declared Ahiranya must be made pure, Vikram realized Chandra's. In Chapter 10, Rao was at a brothel, waiting for a poet's salon to begin when imperial soldiers stormed in searching for rebels. The brothel madam shut down the performance, signaling trouble. Rao sensed something was wrong and stayed behind, listening as the soldiers interrogated the poet, Baldev, about an attack on the regent's mahal. When the soldiers found Rao, he feigned drunkenness, but they dragged him into the room where Baldev, his followers, and several women were being rounded up. Chaos erupted when a man resisted, leading to violence. Baldev, realizing Rao was Parihati, denied knowing him, saving his life. Rao fled, leaving Baldev and the others to their fate. He later woke in a luxurious pleasure house, tended by Lata and confronted by Prince Prem. Prem urged him to leave Ahiranya and join their cause to reinstate Emperor Aditya, but Rao remained fixated on his true mission. In Chapter 11, Priya was imprisoned beneath the Mahal after killing Meena. Bound and led to a damp cell, she sat in the dark, reliving the moment she had fought Meena and unlocked the magic she had buried since childhood. Hours passed before she was summoned to Lady Bhumika, the regent's wife and a former temple daughter like Priya. Bhumika chastised her for revealing herself, but admitted that the princess had pleaded for Priya to serve as her maid. Bhumika needed Priya to watch over the princess, ensuring her safety while gathering information. Priya reluctantly agreed. As she left, Rook, the boy she had taken in, confronted her. Tearful and desperate, he revealed he had been ordered to befriend her and now feared for his life. The rebels wanted her. When he begged her to come with him, Priya, realizing his danger, agreed, on the condition. In Chapter 12, Priya followed Rook into the forest, leaving the city behind. He led her to the Bower of Bones, an eerie place where rot-riven animals were left to die and where whispers spoke of old magic. There, Priya realized the rebels had been using Rook for information, exploiting his desperation. As they waited, Priya pressed him for answers, learning the rebels had other spies within the Mahal and had specifically ordered him to keep her away from the Hirana. A masked figure arrived. When Priya fought and unmasked him, she was stunned. It was Ashok, her long-lost brother. Ashok revealed he had survived by drinking deathless water from a mysterious woman and had become a leader of the resistance. He asked Priya to help him find the true source of the water. Torn between loyalty and caution, she thought of all Ahiranya had suffered. In the end, she agreed. In Chapter 13, Malini, still weak from her captivity and drugging, successfully secures Priya as her personal maidservant, having recognized her as the woman who killed an assassin with precision and strength. As Pramila presents Priya, Malini carefully studies her, noting her unassuming presence, but also sensing the raw power beneath her quiet exterior. She ensures control over their relationship by instructing Priya to call her "my lady" and subtly manipulating the situation to make Priya feel needed, asking her to guard her at night and tell her stories, which Priya hesitantly agrees to. Malini recognizes not only Priya's physical capability, but also the kindness in her heart when she speaks of a child she tells stories to in the Mahal. Understanding that Priya is not just a simple maid, Malini sees in her both a weapon and an opportunity, someone she can. In Chapter 14, Priya struggles with exhaustion and confinement as she alone maintains the Hirana, while Pramila watches her closely and locks her in the northern chamber with Malini each night. Malini, drugged and withdrawn, does not ask Priya about Meena or demand stories, but listens passively to Pramila's lectures on the mothers of flame, drinking the drugged wine that keeps her docile. As Priya's connection to the Hirana strengthens, she notices subtle shifts in the carvings and spirits around her, sensing the growing power of the temple beneath her feet. Denied her holy day of rest, she uses feigned meekness to convince Pramila to grant her small freedoms, meeting Seema to ensure Rook's safety, despite his loyalty to the rebels. Malini, increasingly restless, finally commands Priya to bathe her, revealing that Pramila forces her to take needle flower, a drug that can weaken or kill over time, leaving Priya questioning both Malini's. In Chapter 15, Bhumika defies her guards' concerns about her pregnancy and secretly leaves the Mahal in a palanquin, skillfully avoiding Lord Santosh's spies, who remain unaware they are being watched in return. She travels through Hirana Prastha, observing how the city has deteriorated before reaching the execution grounds where she witnesses the brutal death of rebels, including Ni'o, maidservants dressed as brides, burned alive to appease Emperor Chandra's ideology. Meeting with a Mahout, she confirms that the rebels had been tortured but revealed no names, ensuring her own secret support for them remains undiscovered. Later, she summons Ashok in the Sangam, warning him that rebellion will bring destruction, but he remains convinced that Priya will find the deathless waters. Returning home, she hides her knowledge of the executions from Vikram, then learns Pramila is denying Priya rest, deciding she will soon need to test the loyalty. In Chapter 16, Priya's dreams shift to water, mirroring Malini's nightmares of fire, as her connection to the Hirana deepens, even altering the stone beneath her feet. One night, Priya wakes to Malini weeping in her sleep, trapped in a nightmare. When Priya shakes her awake, Malini lashes out instinctively, gripping Priya's wrist in a bruising grasp before realizing where she is. Though weakened by poison, Malini agrees to walk with Priya, and Priya distracts her with a tale of the Yaksa. But Malini's questions about the deathless waters reveal her dangerous knowledge. When Pramila catches them, she strikes Priya, but Malini protects her, forcing Pramila to redirect her rage. Later, Priya pretends obedience, knowing she must take control of Malini's medicine to stop her slow poisoning. Sitting by Malini as she falls asleep, Priya feels a growing, inconvenient attraction, but forces herself to focus. In Chapter 17, Priya finds herself in the Sangam, the mystical confluence of cosmic rivers, where she encounters Bhumika, who has summoned her. They discuss Malini's poisoning, with Priya revealing that Pramila is dosing her with powdered needle flower in her wine. Priya suspects that Emperor Chandra wants Malini to burn, but if she refuses, poison will slowly kill her instead. Bhumika confirms that women were burned in the city, signaling the Emperor's obsession with purification. Their conversation turns to Ashok, whom Priya now knows is alive. Bhumika warns that he seeks to restore a past Ahiranya through bloodshed, comparing him to the Emperor. Priya, resentful of Bhumika's past secrecy, declares her intent to seek the deathless waters, but Bhumika urges her to focus on keeping Malini alive first. Before Priya wakes, Bhumika shoves her under the water, cementing their pact. Priya awakens to move carvings, proof that the Hirana's... In Chapter 18, Priya continues caring for Princess Malini, who grows sicker from Pramila's steady poisoning with needle flower. Malini reveals that Emperor Chandra likely wants her to choose death by fire willingly, but failing that, the poison ensures her demise. Malini explains that Pramila's hatred comes from Malini refusing to burn alongside Pramila's daughter, a punishment masked as honor. Priya convinces Pramila to let her administer Malini's nightly medicine, secretly planning to control the poison dosage and keep Malini alive. Privately, Priya and Malini grow closer, developing trust despite the danger it brings. Priya is troubled by her growing feelings for Malini but resolves to protect her, confronting both her own conflicted emotions and the danger she faces. She pledges inwardly to save Malini from poison, aware that doing so risks her own safety and realizing their bond might complicate more. In Chapter 19, Rao, devastated by the burning of Ahiranya women, drinks heavily with Prem, reminiscing about their past. The next day, he and Lada visit Lord Govind, an aging Ahiranya noble, under the guise of intellectual discussion. Lada presents him with hand-copied books, and Govind, wary but intrigued, allows the conversation to shift to Ahiranya's rebellion. He confirms that Ahiranya's resistance is not just anger, but a dream of freedom, though factions differ in their methods, some through art, others through bloodshed. Rao hints at a broader Parihati opposition to Emperor Chandra, but Govind, disillusioned, warns that faith-driven violence only begets more violence. He predicts that retaliation for the burnings is imminent and advises Rao to leave Ahiranya before chaos erupts. Though Govind refuses direct help, his words confirm that Ahiranya is on the brink of violent upheaval, leaving Rao determined to press. In Chapter 20, Jitesh, a weary guard at Lord Iskar's celebration, dreads his new Parijati commander, who dismisses the Ahiranya rebellion and mocks the burning of women. Before he can finish his speech, a masked rebel assassinates him, repeating his words mockingly before killing 2 more guards. Jitesh flees into the Haveli, but as he reaches the celebration, more masked rebels emerge, killing Parihati elites with brutal precision. Chaos erupts. Lord Iskar is murdered, his wife and child targeted, and the house is set ablaze. Overwhelmed by fear, Jitesh runs blindly, only to be confronted by another masked rebel. As he collapses, seemingly paralyzed, the rebel thanks him before drawing their knife. The attack signals a deadly escalation. The rebellion has begun, targeting the Pariyati elite in retaliation for the executions and oppression, and no one. In Chapter 21, Malini's condition improves rapidly once Priya begins reducing the poison. She insists on walking around the room, touching the walls, and reminiscing about her past life in the imperial mahal, where she had once been adorned in silk and flowers. Priya supports her, their hands hovering near each other, the moment charged with unspoken tension. Malini presses Priya to admit a desire, leading Priya to reveal a childhood memory, a coconut from the forest that blooms with dark purple flowers inside. The conversation takes a sudden shift when Malini withdraws, asking to be alone. As Priya steps outside, she notices that the carvings on the temple floor have shifted, now resembling flames, an ominous warning. A sudden shriek breaks the silence. Pramila rushes in, frantic. The city has been attacked. The general is missing. As Priya steps to the edge of the temple, she sees the truth. Fire rages below. In Chapter 22, Priya attempts to flee the Hirana, but guards force her back inside, reminding her that no one can leave. Malini follows, pulling Priya into a secluded room where she makes a desperate plea. Priya can fight. Priya can kill. She could get them both out. Malini details the weaknesses of the guards, proving she has studied them, but Priya refuses, thinking of Bhumika and the Mahal. Malini then turns to manipulation, using soft touches and coaxing words, but Priya finally sees through her. Malini is using her. Furious, Priya demands to know what Malini can offer in return. Malini, unfazed, proposes a deal. Priya wants something, and Malini has knowledge and allies beyond the prison. Shaken, Priya flees the room, overwhelmed. Kneeling alone, desperate to know if her loved ones survived, Priya does the only thing left to her. She sinks into the Sangam. In Chapter 23, Ashok and his rebels flee into the forest after their attack on Lord Iskar's Haveli. Sarita collapses, dying from the effects of the deathless waters, but Ashok refuses to spare his dwindling supply to save her. Kritika mercy kills her, and they move on. In the Sangam, Priya calls out to Ashok, demanding to know if he killed General Vikram. Ashok admits he considered it, but chose Lord Iskar instead, crippling Vikram's power. Priya warns him his actions will bring brutal retaliation, but Ashok believes violence is the only way to free Ahiranya. When Priya hesitates to help him find the deathless waters, Ashok forces her to feel the power's cost, crushing her shadow heart inside the Sangam. He tells her pain made them strong, but Priya feels betrayed. She rejects him, fleeing the Sangam. Alone, Ashok reflects, she will have to find the water. In Chapter 24, Priya is flung back into her body from the Sangam, gasping for breath as if drowning. Pain sears through her chest where Ashok had crushed her shadow heart, leaving her disoriented and struggling to breathe. Malini is kneeling beside her, calm but focused, urging Priya to control herself and stay quiet. Priya realizes the temple is covered in moss and vines, the stone reshaping itself, a clear sign that her powers are unraveling beyond her control. Panicked, Priya gasps about Pramila seeing the changes, but Malini remains steady, telling her they don't know when Pramila will return. Weak and overwhelmed, Priya murmurs an apology, though she does not know why. The pain from Ashok's attack consumes her, and she loses consciousness, Malini's cold, resolute face. In Chapter 25, Malini recalls her childhood when she first held a knife and learned the cost of defiance. Playing in the garden with her friends, she had stolen a blade, but when her brother Chandra found her, he punished her brutally, cutting her hair while lecturing her about obedience. From that day, she learned the power of submission, the value of tears as a weapon, and how to conceal her true nature beneath meekness. Back in the present, Malini watches over Priya, who lies unconscious after losing control of her magic. The walls pulse with life, vines curling through the stone, evidence of Priya's power. When Priya wakes, she is furious, accusing Malini of manipulation. Malini finally reveals her true past, explaining that she had plotted to overthrow Chandra in favor of her brother Aditya. She offers Priya a bargain, deliver a message to her ally in Hirana in exchange for a future where Ahiranya is free from imperial rule. Priya agrees, but only as... In Chapter 26, Bhumika learns of the attack on Lord Iskar's Haveli when the conch is sound. She waits anxiously in the Mahal, surrounded by the most vulnerable members of her household, uncertain of her husband's fate. When General Vikram returns, wounded but alive, she rushes to his side. He recounts the brutality of the rebel attack, revealing that Lord Iskar and his wife were killed. Meanwhile, Lord Santosh took advantage of the chaos, unleashing destruction on Ahiranya's streets in retaliation. As Vikram processes the situation, he recognizes the growing threat of Santosh's power. When Santosh returns, Vikram confronts him, furious at his reckless violence, warning that his actions have united the Ahiranya people against them. Santosh, however, remains defiant, convinced the Emperor will soon replace Vikram with him. After Santosh leaves, Bhumika, hiding her true thoughts, tenderly cares for Vikram, ensuring he rests, while quietly calculating what... In Chapter 27, Priya poisons Pramila's tea with a small dose of needle flower, ensuring she will be asleep long enough for Priya to deliver Malini's message. While preparing the evening meal, she finds a hidden note from Seema, crudely written but heartfelt, reminding her that someone outside still cares for her. She takes the food to Pramila's chamber and confirms she is sleeping. Returning to Malini's cell, she finds her collapsed on the floor, suffering from withdrawal. Malini insists she will recover and urges Priya to proceed with their plan. Priya's destination is the Palace of Illusions, a pleasure house in the Pink Lantern District, where she is to meet a Sakitan noble with hidden allegiances. As she leaves, Malini uncharacteristically expresses concern for her safety. Priya steels herself, reminding Malini of her dependence on her. With a deep breath, she steps onto the Hirana, feeling its magic. In Chapter 28, a maidservant arrives at the pleasure house where Rao and Prem are hiding, asking for Lord Rajan. Rao quickly realizes she is a messenger from Malini. Taking her into a private room, he demands proof of her identity. She recites a coded memory about a knife, one that only Malini would know, confirming her legitimacy. The maid, Priya, presses him for answers. Can he save Malini? Is Aditya still alive? Rao confirms that Aditya lives and has strong support from Parijat lords, Sakitan princes, and the Sultan of Dorali. However, he admits that freeing Malini is proving difficult. Priya warns that storming the Hirana is impossible, emphasizing the tight security. She gives Rao no means of escape, only updates on Malini's health. She is sick, poisoned, and reliant on Priya to survive. Before leaving, Rao recalls his original pact with Malini to help her remove Chandra and... In Chapter 29, Priya delays returning to the Hirana, seizing a rare moment of freedom. She resists the urge to visit Rook or Seema, knowing she has no excuse to be seen in the Mahal, but instead goes to Gautam, an old contact who has secretly supplied her brother Ashok. Gautam, initially wary, refuses to speak until Priya forces his compliance, breaking his scythe with her bare hands, reminding him that she is just as dangerous as Ashok. Under pressure, Gautam confesses that Ashok buys medicines, wound treatments, and, most importantly, deathless water, the forbidden substance that gives temporary power but ultimately destroys the body. In exchange for not destroying his hidden vials of deathless water, Priya demands information on needle flower, the poison slowly killing Malini. Gautam, fearful but resigned, agrees to tell her the long-term effects of needle flower and what happens. In Chapter 30, Malini's withdrawal from needle flower worsens after Priya leaves. She suffers hallucinations and memory lapses, seeing visions of her past and the ghosts of Narina and Alori, her closest friends who burned on the pyre. As her condition deteriorates, she struggles to distinguish reality from delusion. Priya returns from her mission and finds Malini disoriented and weak. She delivers news from Rao. Aditya's rebellion is growing, but there is no clear plan to free Malini. Malini suggests negotiating with General Vikram, but she soon realizes she is too unstable to strategize effectively. Priya, after consulting a healer, offers Malini a small dose of needle flower, explaining that sudden withdrawal could kill her. Malini resists, haunted by what the drug has done to her. But as her mind fractures further, Pramila nearly catches them, forcing Priya to act quickly. In the end, Priya convinces Malini to take a sip, and Malini collapses into sleep. In Chapter 31, Priya stays by Malini's side through the night, carefully measuring out needle flower doses. Terrified, she has miscalculated. Malini remains unconscious, breathing but unresponsive, forcing Priya to hold and care for her, coaxing her to drink. She whispers reassurances, hoping Malini can hear. The next day, Malini briefly wakes and whispers a final command, "Tell Rao to go." Priya sneaks out again, drugging Pramila to ensure she remains asleep. Navigating the city during the Festival of the Dark of the Moon, Priya finds the streets alive with defiant celebration, though signs of imperial destruction remain. She reaches Rao and delivers Malini's message. Rao refuses to leave, believing Aditya needs Malini, but Priya warns that Malini is too weak to escape or lead. Finally, Priya makes an unspoken choice. Her first loyalty is to Ahiranya, not Malini, but she still promises Rao that she will do everything. In Chapter 32, Rao struggles with Malini's impending death, revealing his conflict to Prem, who insists she is not vital to their cause. Prem believes Aditya will honor her if she dies, but refuses to risk everything to save her. Determined, Rao chases after Priya and stops her in the night market. He instructs her to tell Malini that if she escapes, they will wait at the Bower of Bones until the festival ends. Priya warns that Malini would not approve, but Rao insists she deserves the choice. Back at the pleasure house, Lada reminds Rao that it's time to leave for Aditya. They discuss his true name, a secret only his late sister Alori knew. Her name had prophesied her death by fire, while his remains unspoken. Finally, Rao accepts that Malini's fate is out of his hands and sets off for Shrugna, believing his work in Chapter 33, Priya climbs the Hirana, reveling in her brief freedom before checking on Malini, who appears stronger and has taken her needle flower dose. Assured of her survival, Priya enters the Sangam, summoning Bhumika. She confesses everything: Malini's plot, Aditya's rise, and the coming war. Bhumika, weary, acknowledges that Ahiranya will be caught in the conflict, but she isn't sure how to act. She warns Priya that Ashoka is no longer the brother she remembers, and that Priya herself is as dangerous as him, moving toward power without hesitation. Bhumika vows to guide Vikram toward a survivable path, hinting at other temple children as potential allies. She asks Priya to keep Malini imprisoned a little longer, and Priya agrees. Stepping into the rain-slicked Triveni, Priya realizes she has chosen to forget something vital: the truth of the night the temple children burned. For the first time in 10 years, in Chapter 34, Priya remembers the night the temple children burned. As a child, she and Nandi were part of the youngest group in the Hirana, learning to control their gifts. The temple elders debated the children's growing power and the coming Parijatdvipa attack, hinting at a sacrificial end. At the festival feast, the children were poisoned, and soldiers stormed the temple. Ashok, still strong, fought to protect Priya, killing soldiers as they escaped. Priya found the way to the deathless waters, her unique bond with the Hirana guiding them. The temple burned behind them, their siblings lost. In the present, Priya fully remembers, standing in the rain-drenched Hirana. No longer hollow, she embraces her power. The deathless waters call to her, and she descends into the dark. With no hesitation, she steps forward, immersing herself in the waters that once made her. In Chapter 35, Ashok and his followers negotiate with a group of rot-riven outcasts for weapons, but his real prize is their hidden vials of deathless water. Midway, he is hit by a surge of starry power, realizing Priya has found the way. Staggering, he enters the Sangam calling for her, but she does not answer. Furious, he returns to his body. Kritika and his men have eliminated the outcasts, securing their supplies. Ashok declares their next move: find Priya and take the way from her no matter the cost. Kritika challenges him. If they fight, they all must drink the deathless water together. Ashok warns them this could be their last battle, their final stand, but the group is ready to burn Parihati rule to the ground. With their last vials in hand, they drink. Their goal is clear: take the Hirana, take its power. In Chapter 36, Bhumika returns to her body shaken by Ashok's surge of power. Knowing time is running out, she summons Vikram, her husband and Ahiranya's regent, warning him that the city is in grave danger. When he demands names, she refuses, knowing he will dismiss her as a mere wife rather than a trusted advisor. Vikram belittles her concerns, insisting that anyone important would have spoken to him, not her. Enraged, Bhumika holds back the full truth: that Ashok is preparing for war, fueled by the deathless waters, and Priya has taken his power for herself. Instead, she warns him, if he ignores her, the city will burn. Vikram grabs her, shaking her, but when he sees her pregnant belly, his anger turns to condescension, reducing her to a vessel for their child. Bhumika submits outwardly, but inwardly, she knows she cannot rely on him. If Ahiranya is to survive. In Chapter 37, Priya plunges into the deathless waters, feeling them burn through her, hollowing her out before filling her with raw, untamed power. She sees visions: fire, rivers of water, ancient voices, before realizing she can feel everything in Ahiranya: the forest, the land, Bhumika, Ashok, and others like her. Breaking the surface, she gasps for air, reborn, twice born. Power hums through her, making the ground bloom beneath her touch. Laughing, she embraces her strength, knowing Ashok is searching for her, demanding what she now possesses. But she won't give it to him. To stop him, she seals the entrance to the deathless waters before returning to the Hirana. Entering Malini's chamber, she finds Malini bruised, clutching her cheek. Before Priya can react, a sharp blade presses against her chin. Pramila stands behind her, hand trembling. In chapter 38, Malini remains still as Pramila holds a knife to Priya's throat, accusing them of poisoning her. Malini feigns fear and innocence, but Pramila's grief over Narina's death fuels her rage. As blood drips from Priya's throat, Malini regains her strength, threatening vengeance if Pramila kills Priya. Suddenly, vines creep from the floor, choking Pramila. Priya, soaked and calm, controls them, forcing Pramila to drop the knife. Malini urges Priya to kill Pramila, but Priya refuses and offers Malini the knife instead. Malini hesitates, haunted by Narina's memory, and Priya lets Pramila live. Priya proposes a final deal: Malini's freedom in exchange for Ahiranya's independence. Malini hesitates, knowing the political risks, but vows to grant it if she escapes. A noise below signals danger. With no time left, Priya declares. In chapter 39, Bhumika sits in her room as the conch sounds, signaling the rebel attack. She watches fire spread across the city, targeting high-born Parijatdvipa, merchants, and her own uncle. Knowing the Mahal will be attacked, she gathers her servants and children, preparing them with weapons, boiling oil, and a plan for defense. A traitor is revealed. Ruk, a boy Priya saved, who had spied for the rebels and provided information on the Mahal's weaknesses. Ruk confesses, expressing regret, and Bhumika offers him a choice: serve her until death or face execution. He vows loyalty to her. As she prepares for the impending siege, Bhumika sits among her magically grown roses, knowing she is as powerful as the rebels who come for her. She calls for Ashok, daring him to face her, ready to. In chapter 40, chaos engulfs the Mahal as Commander Jivan and the regent's personal guard vanish, leaving Lord Santosh's men unaccounted for. Lowly Guard Mithunan, unprepared for battle, is captured by rebels and forced to lead them to Lady Bhumika's palace. As they near the Rose Palace, Mithunan realizes the Fort of Flowers has changed, its vines thicker and darker, shadows twisting within. Despite his compliance, the rebels stab him, leaving him to bleed out. Before they can reach Bhumika, arrows rain down from the windows and roof. The ground shifts beneath them, revealing Bhumika's magic. Flowers sharpen like glass. Thorns burst from the earth, consuming one rebel, while another is impaled by a spear of green. As Mithunan's vision fades, he watches the rebels fall to Bhumika's power, realizing too late that they had always intended to kill him. In chapter 41, Malini and Priya begin their perilous descent down the Hirana with arrows flying at them. Priya, guiding Malini, unexpectedly manifests her magic, creating moss to catch Malini when she nearly falls. Shocked but determined, Priya steadies Malini and continues their escape. At the bottom, rebels ambush them, but Priya fends them off with her powers, revealing she sealed the way to the deathless waters, denying Ashok and his rebels the power they sought. As the rebels retreat, Priya and Malini run through the burning city, navigating chaos and destruction. Priya insists on returning to save her friends, but Malini persuades her that protecting Ahiranya means ensuring Malini reaches Aditya. Priya finally relents and leads Malini into the forest. But just as they near safety, Priya suddenly collapses, blood streaking her face, leaving Malini. In chapter 42, Ashok stands before the Rose Palace, where Bhumika has fortified herself with deadly bloodied thorns. He acknowledges her strength but chooses to leave, believing he will overpower her once he becomes thrice-born. Leading his rebels, he climbs the Hirana, revisiting the place where his temple siblings burned. Inside, they eliminate the guards and find only an unconscious woman, not Malini. He orders his men to interrogate her for information on Priya. At the Triveni, Ashok attempts to command the Hirana, expecting it to reveal the deathless waters, but the temple remains silent, rejecting him. Despite searching every chamber and even entering the Sangam, he fails to locate the entrance. With his followers dying from the deathless waters' poison, Ashok accepts defeat, for now. He orders his men to leave the Hirana and hunt down Priya, determined to claim. In chapter 43, Priya is barely conscious, suffering the deadly fever that follows emerging from the deathless waters. Malini supports her, guiding her through the forest despite her own exhaustion. Priya confesses her magic's origins, how the temple children's powers had awakened when they entered the waters, but the elders turned against them, believing them responsible for the rot. She wonders if her magic could cure the rot, but now she is dying before she can find out. Malini refuses to leave Priya behind. Despite Priya's insistence that Malini doesn't truly care for her, Malini vows she needs her, not just for their survival, but for something more. Through the haze of fever, Priya senses other gifted kin in the forest, stronger than she's ever known. She marks the trees, guiding Malini toward them. Malini carries Priya forward, determined to find these mysterious... In chapter 42, Ashok stands before the Rose Palace, where Bhumika has fortified herself with deadly, bloodied thorns. He acknowledges her strength but chooses to leave, believing he will overpower her once he becomes thrice-born. Leading his rebels, he climbs the Hirana, revisiting the place where his temple siblings burned. Inside, they eliminate the guards and find only an unconscious woman, not Malini. He orders his men to interrogate her for information on Priya. At the Triveni, Ashok attempts to command the Hirana, expecting it to reveal the deathless waters, but the temple remains silent, rejecting him. Despite searching every chamber and even entering the Sangam, he fails to locate the entrance. With his followers dying from the deathless water's poison, Ashok accepts defeat, for now. He orders his men to leave the Hirana and hunt down Priya, determined to claim... In chapter 45, Bhumika learns that her husband, Vikram, has survived the rebel attack. Though she had hoped Ashok would eliminate this choice for her, she orders Vikram to be locked in a room within the Rose Palace, preparing to face him. Vikram, gravely wounded, is bewildered by how the rebels breached the city's defenses. As he speaks of seeking the Emperor's aid, Bhumika refuses, stating she will not leave Ahiranya. When he asserts control over her and their child, she firmly declares her independence. Realizing her true power, Vikram is horrified as the thorns around them coil with unnatural force. She locks him away, sealing her break from him and Parijatdvipa. Determined to secure Ahiranya's future, she rallies the survivors, revealing that Priya has rediscovered the lost temple powers. Gathering loyalists, she prepares to find Priya. When Rook, the young boy marked by the rot, insists on joining, she allows him. In chapter 46, Priya dreams of the Sangam, where she encounters a yaksa, a reflection of herself, yet something otherworldly. It tells her they will meet again before marking her with a cut and kissing her, revealing visions of the world, the growing rot, and beings with flowers for eyes. She wakes in a small hut, weak but alive, with Malini at her side. Elder Chandni, a surviving temple elder, steps forward. Priya recognizes her from childhood, a reminder of the elders who betrayed and slaughtered her temple siblings. Chandni reveals the truth. The elders feared the temple children's power, believing it caused the rot, and tried to destroy them. However, the rot took the elders instead, binding them to a monstrous tree. Priya realizes she and her siblings were the cure, not the cause. Chandni, resigned and broken, tells Priya she cannot stop her. In chapter 47, Vikram, weakened by his wounds and betrayal, clings to the hope of escape. When the door opens, he sees Javan, his trusted commander, and a young guard. Believing he has been rescued, he asks for help escaping to Parijatdvipa. Javan kneels before him, his tone measured, but he is no longer wearing the Empire's colors. As he removes his shawl, Vikram realizes the truth. Javan has betrayed him. Desperate, Vikram demands justice, mercy, a trial, but Javan remains unmoved. Bhumika is not the one to kill him. Javan takes that burden himself. The young guard pins Vikram down, driving the breath from him as Javan loops the noose around his neck. In his final moments, Vikram laughs bitterly at the ruin of everything he fought for. His life ends without trial, without mercy. In chapter 48, Rao and Prem's men ambush Santosh's forces, using the Parijati Lord's reliance on traditional warfare against him. The battle turns brutal, with Prem and Rao fighting side by side. Rao manages to kill Santosh, but not before Prem is gravely wounded, stabbed through the stomach. As Prem falls, Rao sees the truth. His friend's skin is marked with the rot, veins limned in green. Shocked, Rao realizes that Prem had been hiding his affliction all along. Prem reveals that the rot is not just in Ahiranya, but has begun spreading in Cicada as well. Before dying, Prem tells Rao his true purpose, to convince Aditya to take the throne. Prem had stayed because he believed only Rao could sway the exiled prince. With Prem buried, Rao and the others reach Shrugna and the Lacquer Gardens, where Aditya's allies await. Rao steals himself. Prem is dead, but... In chapter 49, Chandni and Sendil, former temple elders afflicted by the rot, sit in a hut, waiting for the inevitable. Ashok and his rebels arrive, demanding Priya's whereabouts. Chandni, despite her failing body, refuses to betray her. Ashok accuses Chandni of protecting Priya and questions if she is her mother, but Chandni dismisses the relevance. Sendhil regrets not killing Priya when they had the chance, but Chandni knows it's too late. Priya's survival has already changed everything. Ashok, consumed by his need to find Priya, threatens Chandni, but she remains defiant. He acknowledges her dying state but promises to make her suffer if she does not answer. When she refuses, he orders her and Sendhil to be tied to the tree of flesh, leaving them to an unknown fate. Chandni accepts it, knowing she has done. In Chapter 50, Priya and Malini travel through the forest, heading directly to the Seeker's Path, with Priya determined to avoid the Bower of Bones. Malini, struggling to keep up, urges Priya to stop and rest. Priya, angry and unsettled by her elder's betrayal, finally halts at a stream. As she washes, she confesses her fears, that her own family saw her as monstrous and that she is afraid Malini might betray her too. Malini admits she is monstrous in her own way, refusing to obey the expectations of her family and embracing her own desires. The tension between them escalates as Malini helps untangle Priya's hair, speaking plainly about her feelings. Overcome, Priya and Malini finally give in to their longing, kissing in the water beneath the waterfall, their touch a mix of fury, tenderness, and burning desire, solidifying the bond between them. In Chapter 51, Rao arrives at the lacquer gardens of Shrugna, where warriors and nobles from across the empire have gathered to pledge themselves to Prince Aditya, the rightful heir to the imperial throne. Aditya greets Rao warmly, but his demeanor is burdened by doubt. He is delayed taking up his claim, waiting for a divine sign. As Rao recounts Prem's death and Malini's uncertain fate, Aditya listens with sorrow, but remains hesitant. He reveals a vision granted by the nameless god, a coming sickness, and inevitable destruction that threatens all lands, not just Parijatdvipa. Aditya fears this greater catastrophe outweighs the need to depose Chandra. Rao pressures Aditya to act, reminding him of Chandra's cruelty and the women burned for defying him. But Aditya still hesitates, torn between faith and duty. He assures Rao that Malini is alive and has watchers on the Seeker's Path. Exhausted, Rao is left questioning whether Aditya will. In Chapter 52, Malini and Priya rest by the rock pool, basking in rare peace after their ordeal. Malini feels a deep sense of happiness and freedom as she reflects on their kiss, savoring Priya's presence. Priya reassures her that her desires don't make her monstrous, and Malini, for the first time, truly believes it. Priya destroys Malini's vial of needle flower, replacing it with a living black blossom that will only wither when Priya dies. A memento of their survival, not just loss. Their peace is short-lived. Priya senses danger, and they run, but are quickly surrounded by Ashok and his rebels. Priya tries to resist, summoning thorns, but the rebels have also used the deathless waters and overpower her. Ashok demands she lead them to the waters, threatening Malini to force Priya's hand. Priya fights back viciously, and Malini seizes a burning wooden dagger, pressing it against Priya's wrist. In Chapter 53, Priya stands frozen as Malini holds a burning wooden knife to her ribs, using the threat of her death to force Ashok and his rebels to let them go. Malini's gamble works. Ashok hesitates, doubting Malini's resolve. But Malini is unwavering, declaring that if Priya dies, the knowledge of the deathless waters dies with her. Before the standoff can escalate, Bhumika arrives with an army of maidservants, soldiers, and loyalists. The rebels, though enhanced by the deathless waters, are overpowered by Bhumika and Priya's combined strength, their magic working in perfect harmony. Priya realizes the true power of the temple children when united. Ashok, overwhelmed, collapses, coughing blood and water. His men retreat, carrying him away. Bhumika halts the pursuit, believing they have already won. She turns to Priya, asking if she is well, as Priya stands amidst the wreckage. In Chapter 54, Priya, dazed and bloodied, kneels beside Malini, who is shaken by what she nearly did. Malini stammers out a fragmented apology, and Priya presses her forehead to Malini's, helping her steady her breath. Bhumika arrives with her forces, including old friends and loyalists, and takes charge of the situation. Priya explains Malini's offer, symbolic independence for Ahiranya if Aditya wins. Bhumika, while skeptical, acknowledges its potential. She then requests to speak privately with Malini, hinting that Priya should go meet someone in the camp. Priya finds Seema, who greets her with a crushing hug, and then sees Rook transformed by the rot, his veins green, his hair textured like leaves. He apologizes for joining the rebels, but Priya reassures him. As they recount what has happened in Hirana, Priya begins to wonder if the deathless waters can destroy. In chapter 55, Ashok's rebels begin dying, one then another. The deathless waters had granted them power, but now they were failing. Ashok, growing weaker himself, knows he must find Priya and take her knowledge, by force, deceit, or even begging. As his condition worsens, his most loyal follower, Kritika, urges him to drink the last vial of the deathless waters. She tells him he must survive, become thrice-born, and take the mantle of High Elder to save Ahiranya. But Ashok refuses. He knows he does not have the strength to lead. Instead, he tells Kritika that she must drink it. If she and even a few others survive, their strength would be enough. Kritika hesitates, but finally presses a drop to her tongue. Instead of drinking, she places the vial back in Ashok's belt and departs, leaving him to rest, perhaps knowing. In chapter 56, Malini grapples with the near killing of Priya, haunted by the thought of her blade almost piercing Priya's heart. She hides her turmoil as she walks with Bhumika's retinue, exchanging guarded conversations with the Ahiranya leader. Their pact is reaffirmed. Malini will be delivered to Aditya, and in return, Bhumika will protect Ahiranya and wait for the Empire's fate to be decided. When they stop to rest, Priya seeks Malini out. Malini confesses that she truly intended to kill her but couldn't. Priya, unwavering, tells her, "Then you're not the person you think you are." Malini insists she must become monstrous for power, but Priya challenges her. Power does not have to mean losing oneself. Later, as Bhumika goes into labor, they discover soldiers ahead. Malini yells for Prince Rao, recognizing the Alaran men. He stops the fight, and at last he brings news. In chapter 57, Priya leaves Malini with Aditya's allies and returns to camp, wary of the Parijatdvipa men. As she arrives, she sees a crowd around Bhumika's tent. She is in labor. Kalida, ever distrustful, tries to block Priya, but Priya forces her way inside. Inside, Bhumika is in pain, lacking trained midwives. Priya, though frightened, holds her hand for comfort. Realizing they need help, she orders Kalida to fetch Seema, whose mother was a midwife. Seema takes charge, guiding Bhumika while other maidservants bring water and cloth. As Priya watches, a stranger kneels beside her, whispering a chilling message. "I have the boy. Come and speak to me, and I'll return him alive." Priya recognizes the woman's eyes as belonging to a masked rebel. Before she can react, the woman vanishes. Shaken, Priya rises and leaves, ignoring Bhumika's alarm calls. In chapter 58, Malini enters Aditya's encampment, walking beside Rao and followed by Jivan's men. She immediately notices Priya is gone, but forces herself not to look for her. The camp is full of warriors from across Parijatdvipa, watching her with measured gazes. Though dressed plainly, Malini carries herself with the pride of a princess and prepares for the meeting that will determine the course of the empire. Inside a simple Shrugani-style tent, Malini finally reunites with her brother, Aditya. She clutches his arms, overcome with relief that she has made it to him alive. But her joy quickly fades when Aditya hesitates about taking the throne. He claims he is unsure if ruling is his fate, citing visions from the nameless god. Malini, furious, reminds him of Chandra's cruelty and the empire's need for a strong leader. She also demands that Aditya promise Ahiranya's freedom, as she had already pledged it. Aditya gives her a vague agreement, but his disinterest unsettles her. Tomorrow they will return to the monastery, and from there, Malini will begin shaping herself into the weapon necessary to destroy Chandra. But even as she stands on the cusp of victory, she feels an unexpected ache. She thinks of Bhumika, of Jivan's suspicion. In chapter 59, Priya follows the woman who had threatened her in Bhumika's tent and finds Rook bound to a tree by roots, gagged and struggling. The woman, Kritika, a follower of Ashok, demands Priya reveal the way to the deathless waters, threatening to kill Rook. Priya refuses, realizing that Ashok is dying and does not know of Kritika's actions. Instead, Kritika forces Priya to come with her, leading her to Ashok's hidden camp. Ashok is gravely ill, coughing blood, and awaiting death. He knows Priya's refusal to share the waters has doomed him and his followers, but Priya offers a deal. She will lead them to the waters if Ashok vows loyalty to Bhumika and never seeks to overthrow her. Ashok hesitates but agrees, securing a future for his people. After securing Rook's release, Priya returns to camp and meets Bhumika's newborn daughter, Padma. Then she slips away to Malini's tent to say goodbye. Malini is unsurprised but visibly shaken. Priya assures her this is not the end and promises to find her again. Their farewell is raw and aching. They share a final, desperate kiss before Priya leaves, knowing their paths will diverge. In Chapter 60, Malini learns that Bhumika's group has vanished, confirming that Priya and the Ahiranya have separated from them. She tells Rao she ordered them to leave and reaffirms her promise to Priya. Malini travels with Aditya's forces to the lacquer monastery in Srugna, a stunning but highly flammable place. She warns Aditya, but the priests insist on surrendering to fate. Inside, Malini reunites with Lada, a former disciple she secretly contacted before her imprisonment, who updates her on the impatient lords awaiting war. After bathing and dressing strategically, Malini enters the Council of Lords, subtly winning their favor by reminding them of Chandra's injustices and promising them restored power under Aditya. Lord Khalil, a Dwarali noble, recognizes her influence, confirming that the lords see Malini, not Aditya, as the rebellion's true power. As Khalil leaves, Malini acknowledges the risk she is taking. In Chapter 61, a wounded Saketan messenger arrives, warning that Chandra's soldiers are approaching the monastery. Rao realizes that Aditya has heard the news, but has fled instead of acting. Rao recalls Aditya's past reluctance to embrace war, his desire to seek honor without bloodshed, and his belief that a king should stand apart. Rao had once thought Aditya would grow into a great ruler, but now he sees that Aditya has been avoiding his fate all along. Finding him in a garden, Rao demands that he flee before Chandra's forces arrive, but Aditya refuses, claiming he still needs time to understand what must be done. Rao, frustrated, refuses to make the decision for him, forcing Aditya to choose for himself. Aditya walks away, leaving Rao with the bitter realization that his faith and hopes may have been misplaced. Aditya may... In Chapter 62, Malini learns that a Parijatdvipa battalion is approaching, and Aditya remains silent on his plans, frustrating his allies. Rao insists they must strategize rather than flee, but Malini senses that Aditya's inaction is costing them time and men. Determined, she confronts Aditya, urging him to lead his forces before it's too late. Instead, he takes her to a visionary basin, insisting that she must see the truth that binds him to inaction. Malini refuses, arguing that power is taken, not granted by fate. She reminds him of Chandra's cruelty and the price of his passivity. Realizing the monastery is vulnerable to fire, Malini devises a plan to escape through the underground sewers, forcing Aditya to accept. She rallies the lords, declaring Aditya the true heir, linking his faith to the mothers who founded the empire. Aditya finally steps forward, declaring he has a way to secure... In Chapter 63, as Priya, Bhumika, Ashok, and their companions leave Srugna and travel along the Seeker's Path, tension rises between the rebels and the people of the Mahal. Moving slowly, Bhumika and Ashok are carried in makeshift palanquins. Priya walks beside Seema, who carries baby Padma, and they witness another rebel succumb to his injuries, a grim reminder of their journey's cost. When Rook's condition worsens, Priya finds his arm covered in shoots of wood, and the group has no medicine to ease his pain. With Jivan urging them to stay battle-ready, Priya reluctantly entrusts Rook to Ganam, a rebel, who assures her of his care. Ganam's words about protecting children in a free Ahiranya resonate with Priya. As they continue their journey, Priya exchanges a knowing glance with Kritika, signaling a fragile understanding forming between them. The group moves forward, bound by uncertainty. In Chapter 64, Bhumika, weakened from labor, reaches the eerie bower of bones with Padma in her arms. Kalida and Jivan return from scouting ahead, reporting that Hirana is in chaos. Soldiers without masters are causing havoc, making their passage dangerous. Priya proposes a plan to move through the city undetected. Using their powers, the rebels and temple children summon flowers from their skin, mimicking the signs of the rot. This eerie display allows them to pass unchallenged. As they reach the Mahal, Bhumika sees it battered but still held by her loyal maids and guards. Gauri confirms the thorns protected them. Handing Padma to Jivan, Bhumika announces she must go to the Hirana to gain the strength needed to protect Ahiranya. Priya, determined, helps Ashok, who is half-conscious and bleeding. Together, they begin the journey to the temple and its deathless waters, knowing the fight for their home. In Chapter 65, Malini, Rao, Aditya, and their forces navigate through the waterlogged tunnels beneath the lacquer gardens to escape Chandra's approaching soldiers. Malini barely manages to keep her head above water as they move in darkness, carrying their weapons above them. Some of Aditya's followers remain behind to maintain the illusion of an occupied monastery, while the priests of the Nameless choose to stay, accepting their fate. Upon emerging near the Shrugna reservoir, the group hides in the trees, watching the enemy forces enter the valley below. Aditya hesitates, unwilling to give the order to burn the monastery with the enemy and priests inside. Malini steps forward, seizing his bow and declaring fate's judgment. As the warriors light their arrows, she fires first, igniting the lacquer garden. Flames consume the valley, and Rao watches Malini, realizing that this too was a... In Chapter 66, Priya carries Ashok toward the Hirana, despite his protests about his weight. His condition worsens, blood on his lips and rattling breaths in his lungs. He confesses to killing Chandni and leaving her to die, a revelation that stuns Priya. Though she tries to suppress her grief, she feels gutted by his words. Upon reaching the Hirana, Priya presses her hand to the stone and a hidden passage opens. Leading the group through the dark tunnel, she guides Ashok to the deathless waters. As he enters, the other vile poisoned rebels follow. Priya submerges and encounters the Yaksa, who takes Malini's form before transforming into a being of thorns and rot. It commands her to hollow herself, and she obeys, surrendering part of her heart. When she emerges reborn, she learns Ashok did not rise. Bhumika holds her back as she realizes the truth. In Chapter 67, the fires from the monastery burn until morning. When they finally die, Malini insists on seeing the aftermath, despite warnings of the poisonous air. The monastery is destroyed, its occupants either burned or slaughtered. Seeing claw marks on the sealed grates leading to the tunnels, she realizes some had fought to escape but failed. That night, she dreams of Narina and Alori, who remind her that she was once loved, even as she becomes something darker. At dawn, the Dwarali soldiers return with a plan to descend the cliffs and continue toward their forces. Malini and the others make the treacherous descent, determined to reach their army before Chandra's forces do. Days later, as they travel, Rao suddenly stops. Overcome with purpose and fear, he kneels before Malini, not as a friend, but as a subject before his ruler. He declares before all present that it is... In Chapter 68, though they do not call it a coronation, Bhumika and Priya are formally recognized as elders of Ahiranya. Instead of a throne room, they gather at the Triveni, the sacred place of the deathless waters. Behind them stand the newly transformed rebels and the surviving servants of the Mahal. Some ask to enter the waters, but Bhumika refuses, cautioning that the waters demand a price. With baby Padma bound to her chest, Bhumika leads Priya forward. Kritika presents a crown mask, and Priya, after ensuring it does not burn, places it upon Bhumika's face. Power fills her, and together they step into the Sangam, feeling the vastness of Ahiranya, the rivers, trees, and roots woven into their strength. They know they can now defend their land. As voices rise in exultation, naming them elders of Ahiranya, Bhumika and Priya meet each other's eyes, weeping and smiling. In Chapter 69, Rao reveals his true name, spoken in ancient Aloran, delivering a prophecy that shakes the assembled highborn. Malini listens, her heart pounding, as he declares that the princess of Parijatdvipa will be crowned in fire and poison, and she alone will decide who shall reign. She realizes the prophecy is about her. She set the monastery aflame. She took the power Aditya refused. Faced with the weight of fate, Malini chooses to seize the throne herself. She speaks of sacrifice, claiming she has burned away her gentleness and will rule as a mother of Parijatdvipa. The assembled lords exalt her as empress, while Rao kneels, his voice hollow. Malini sees the belief in their eyes, faith, calculation, respect. She will take power, reshape the empire, and bring Chandra to his knees. As the men kneel before her, she vows. In Chapter 70, after Malini's coronation, Priya visits Rukh, who is recovering among the wounded. His body is still altered by the rot, but Priya attempts something new, using her magic to control it. She feels the rot's presence inside him and commands it to stop growing, stabilizing him, Though she cannot restore him, she assures him he will not die. Overcome with emotion, Rook sobs in her arms, and Priya holds him tightly, relieved to have saved him. Later, Priya finds Bhumika drinking alone, staring at the Hirana. Bhumika confronts Priya's desire to leave and urges her to ally with Malini or, if necessary, eliminate her to protect Ahiranya. Priya hesitates but promises she will not forget her loyalties. Determined to help her people, Priya finally realizes her purpose. She is neither warrior nor politician, but she can heal Ahiranya. With newfound resolve, she vows, Epilogue. Chandra kneels in the ruins of his mother's garden, surrounded by the rotting remains of once thriving flowers. He had ordered the garden to be left to decay, reveling in the scent of dying vegetation. The Dwarali birch trees his mother once loved had long been cut down and used for pyres, their wood fueling the burning of women in the name of a higher purpose. Chandra had watched it all. Now, only one pyre remains smoldering, its embers pulsing beneath layers of charred wood and ash. As the fire dims, one ember suddenly brightens, glowing like a heartbeat. Before his astonished eyes, a golden flame unfurls like a blooming flower. Chandra laughs in delight, inhaling the scent of burning flesh and jasmine, savoring its sweetness. As he watches the fire grow, he thinks of his sister, Malini, smiling.